Hello, welcome to this lecture in the course on data governance. Today we will be taking a look at the people and the processes behind the data governance program. I am Linus, and today's table of contents are the introduction. We will be taking a look at the people, the processes, the people and processes together, and some examples of processes and strategies with varying success. And the sources will come last. It is the book Data Governance, the Definitive Guide. As usual, this is the third chapter that is the basis for this lecture. The tools used when building a data governance strategy are important, but not enough by themselves. The people involved and the process of implementing data governance are just as important. A well-functioning data governance program is dependent on a complex interplay of roles and responsibilities. Many organizations struggle to match the roles and the responsibilities of the data governance framework due to the lack of employee skill set or simple lack of headcount. Many people working in IT and data have different responsibilities that may or may not line up with their actual role or job title, wearing different user hats during their workday. Data governance roles and responsibilities can be broadly divided into three categories: governors, who specify the governance policy; data stewards or approvers who implement the governance policy; and the users, the people whose actions are being affected by the governance policy. A fourth category, ancillary, can be added for those roles that are connected to the data governance program but does not fit directly into one of the first three. Table 1 on the next slide shows some examples of user hats, the categories they fall into, and examples of key tasks related to the hat. Some examples of hat include legal, the privacy czar, the data owner, the data steward, the data analyst, data scientist, the business analyst, the customer support specialist, C-suite, and the external auditor. And we will be taking a closer look at each of these hats now. Starting with the legal hat, which belongs to the ancillary category. And it might or might not be an actual attorney. And the tasks include ensuring the organization is up to date regarding compliance with legal requirements and communicating this information internally. Organizations within highly regulated industries often employ an attorney, while other organizations are more likely to have someone with a deep knowledge of the regulations that apply to the data handled by the organization. The privacy czar, belonging to the governor category, is a term used internally at Google, and other names include governance manager, director of privacy, and director of data governance. Key tasks include ensuring that the policies and regulations defined by the legal department are being followed, and overseeing the entire data governance process, including which governance processes should be followed and how. The privacy czar may or may not have a technical background, depending on the organization and its resources. One example of the privacy czar at work is during the COVID-19 pandemic, when Google's privacy czars devised a solution to provide useful data to the health authorities while preserving user privacy. The solution consisted of only using data from people who had turned on location history in Google's services, removing users with outlier results which could be used to identify them, and adding statistical noise to the data, further ensuring that no individual could be identified using the data. Another example from the COVID-19 pandemic was when Google was involved in the effort of contact tracing to help track the movements of people who diagnosed positively for COVID. The benefits of helping health authorities had to be weighted against the user's right to privacy. The solution included only using data from people who enabled the function on their phones, not collecting location data, as the question was whether the person had come into contact with someone, not where it happened, and sharing the information only with the health authorities, not with Google or Apple. The data owner belongs to the approver and or governor category and is the person who owns the data. Key tasks include physically implementing the processes and strategies laid out by the privacy czar, and this includes creating the data architecture of the organization, choosing and implementing tools, creating data pipelines and storage, and implementing monitoring and maintenance. Data owners are mostly people with a technical background. The data steward is part of the governor category, and the hat of the data steward is key to a successful data governance program. Key tasks include categorization and classification of the data, ensuring that sensitive data is handled in compliance, and ensuring that the data is of high quality and can be used effectively by the organization. The act of data stewardship is highly manual and time-consuming, and as a consequence, in many cases there is no one dedicated person to perform data stewardship. This increases the risk of data categorization and classification not being done well or even at all. And this is a huge risk because the categorization and classification of data is one of the key parts of the data governance program as a whole. The data analyst and data scientist hats belong to the user category, and data analysts and scientists are some of the key users of the data within an organization. The more data that can be made available to analysts and scientists, the better the organization can utilize that data. However, the data might be sensitive and should not be available for analysis. A well-functioning data governance program ensures that analysts and scientists are working safely with the best data available. The business analyst is also a part of the user category. Apart from data analysts and data scientists, the data is also used on the business side of the organization. This might create a situation where the analysts or scientists are spending time fielding requests for data instead of performing their actual tasks. Clearly classified data enables business users to answer some of their own questions without the risk of using sensitive data. The customer support specialists belong to the user category in some cases and the ancillary category in other cases. And customer support specialists are generally viewers of data. However, there might be people with this role who will need to access sensitive information. A strategy for granting those people access must be considered and managed by the data governance strategy. C-suite is also part of the ancillary category, and executives might not be directly involved in the implementation of a data governance program, but they are responsible for the funding. Providing the tools and the headcount for the program, it is important that there is an understanding all the way up in the organization. And finally, we have the external auditor hat, which belongs to the ancillary category. External auditors are not part of the organization. They must be considered nonetheless, as it no longer only is important for organizations to be in compliance with regulations, but also to be able to prove that they are. And a clear strategy for documenting the data governance processes helps gathering the information needed in case of an external audit. There is a saying that goes, in order to govern data, you must first know what it is. And the categorization, the classification and labeling of data, also known as data enrichments, are key activities for a successful data governance program. These are the responsibilities of the data steward hat, which is often worn by someone also wearing other hats, such as privacy czar and data owner. This increases the risk of the important data enrichment tasks not being performed. Now let's take a look at some of the processes behind the data governance strategy and program. No two organizations are alike. Any data governance program have to be fitted to the needs of the organization, with considerations given to, amongst other things, the resources, the industry that the organization is working in, and the kinds of data handled by the organization. Companies can be divided into a number of categories, a rough division of categories: the legacy companies, the cloud native or digital only companies, the retail companies, the highly regulated companies, the small companies, and the large companies. And we will be taking a look at some examples of the different processes and what defines these companies. Now, legacy companies are defined as companies that have been around for a long time. Most likely they have or have had legacy on-prem systems, often many different systems, leading to a number of problems, including data governance activities not being fully done, lack of a central data dictionary defining data names, classes, and categories, and different branches of the company keeping their own data unaware of the data in other branches, which also is known as data siloing. An example of a legacy company is a large retail company that keeps its online sales data in one system and the sales data from its physical stores in another system. Different enterprise dictionaries are being used in the two systems, making aggregations and comparisons problematic. Another issue is the handling of sensitive data across the organization. Migrating the data is a massive undertaking, and without a robust framework for the data governance for the entire enterprise, the organization is at risk of making the same mistakes again. The cloud-native or digital-only companies are defined as companies that have and have always had all their data stored in the cloud. Even if they never had any on-prem systems, the data might still be stored across multiple cloud storage solutions with their own version of siloing. The clouds might use different tools and processes for enriching data, and there might also be differences in how the data is stored across different cloud storage solutions, leading to further issues when trying to govern the data. From the definition above, all the data is stored in the cloud. And as this includes sensitive data, cloud-native companies most likely have dealt with the need for governance from the beginning, at least regarding their sensitive data. Retail companies generally ingest quite a bit of data from their own stores, and they might also ingest data from third-party agents. Customer data, such as email addresses, might be collected for the purpose of sending receipts from purchases, and using the same data to send marketing materials is unacceptable unless the customer has given consent. At some companies, the same person might have access to the customer data in different roles, and this calls for a process to clearly describe the use cases for different data classes. Highly regulated companies are defined as companies that deal with extremely sensitive data. This includes industries such as finance, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare. Highly regulated companies face regular external audits to ensure that they are compliant, and they often had data governance frameworks in place from the start, as they have been working with extremely sensitive data. Difficulties include migrating data to the cloud and trying out new tools, since most tools under development are not compliant with regulation standards yet. They might be when they are approved. An example of a highly regulated organization is a hospital university. And one hospital university secured funding to create a specialized team for migrating a large portion of its clinical and research data to the cloud. The tasks to make the data comply with healthcare and research regulations involved creating an enterprise dictionary, enriching the data, reviewing the presence of sensitive data, reviewing policies attached to the data, applying new policies to the data, and applying a standardized file structure. Small companies are here defined as having less than 1,000 employees. Small companies often have small data analytics teams, which mean that fewer people have to touch the data, reducing the risk of data leakage or sensitive data being handled by the wrong persons. Fewer data users also leads to less proliferation of datasets created by analytics or scientists, meaning less data to track and govern. Large companies are here defined as companies with more than 1,000 employees. Large companies often ingest vast amounts of data, more than can be enriched. This creates an iceberg of data with a small governed portion on top of a much larger part of unknown data. Unknown data might be sensitive and non-compliant. Access control is harder to handle with ungoverned data, and this might lead to too much access being granted at the expense of risk. Data might be added from acquisitions of other companies, and the possibility of merging new data with the old is highly reliant on how well the data governance structures of the companies work together. People and processes together. When it is not clearly stated who is responsible for which task in the data governance processes, there is an increased risk of inadequate work, miscommunication, and overall mismanagement. A successful data governance strategy will rely not simply on roles, but on clearly defined tasks, along with who is responsible or accountable for those tasks. A common problem is for data analysts to find the best dataset available for a certain use case. This problem is often solved by word of mouth, or so-called tribal knowledge. This is an obvious risk as roles change and people move on. The solutions include crowdsourcing, where analysts score datasets on their usefulness, and while it might work in organizations with small amounts of data, the method does not scale well and is inherently fallible. Other solutions rely on software tools to help filter searches, minimizing the reliance on tribal knowledge. Any organization wants to be able to make informed decisions based on data. It would seem that the more data available to the organization, the better and more informed decisions it can make. However, for informed decisions to be made from data analysis, the data must be known. Important information about the data includes what the values in a column actually mean, if the values represent sensitive data and must be treated in a certain way, and that the values can be trusted to represent what they are said to represent. In a data-driven organization, many people need to view or interact with the data in different ways. Each hat defined earlier has different types of tasks that need varying levels of access to the data. And there is a connection between knowing which data needs restrictions and deciding what those restrictions should be and who they should affect. Restrictions should not only apply to roles, but there also need to be clearly stated restrictions regarding use cases. Organizations in highly regulated markets, such as the financial and healthcare sectors, has had a long experience with complying with regulations and in many cases have robust data governance programs in place, at least for the regulated data. Regulations such as GDPR affects all organizations that handle personal data. This means that compliance has become a much bigger issue for most organizations with far greater demands on data handling than before. One of the main components of GDPR is the right to be forgotten, to have all personal data stored by an organization deleted. And how can an organization be in compliance with this if it does not know where every bit of a user's data is stored? Finally, we will take a look at some processes and strategies with varying success. Looking at data segregation within storage system, the concept of data siloing mentioned earlier can be taken advantage of. Examples exist of organizations setting up multiple storage systems separating enriched or known data from the unknown data. One way to do this is to keep all unknown data in an on-prem storage system and only push data to the cloud after it has been curated. Curation includes adding metadata and attaching governance controls, such as masking or encrypting sensitive data. This minimizes the risk for sensitive data to be leaked from the cloud, but some drawbacks include difficulties to perform cross-storage analytics, and maintenance of multiple storage systems is time-consuming and requires additional access controls. Another way is to keep all the data in the cloud, but create zones for data in different stages of curation. And Table 2 on the next slide shows an example of this. The benefits and drawbacks of these solutions are nearly a reverse of those from the previous strategy. And here we see an example of 3 data zones for different kinds of data or data with different levels of curation applied to them. The bottom zone is the raw zone, which can contain any kind of data, unstructured, uncurated, and could also include things such as videos and text files, documents, etc. And this zone must be tightly kept with very restricted access, just likely a handful of people or just an administrator. The next zone is the staging zone. Here is kept more known and structured data, and data from multiple sources is likely to be joined here, and this is also where data engineers prep data, cleanse it, and get it ready to drop into the next zone, the insights zone. And the access of this level of data or this zone is more open. Here there are mostly data engineers and those in charge of putting together datasets for the analytics. And on the top we have the insights zone, where known, enriched, curated and clean data lives. And this data also likely has had governance control such as encryption, hashing, redaction, etc. applied to it. And here we have the highest level of access, where most, if not all, data analysts and scientists and other in a user role are given access to the data. Another way to segregate data is by lines of business, creating teams with a deep domain knowledge of their data and letting them handle the enriching of the data. The teams are responsible for handling the data pipelines, the data enrichment, the access control and governance policy management and enforcement, and the data analysis of their line of business. And depending on the size of the organization, these tasks may be handled by a single person, a handful of people, or a large team. We will take a look at the marketing department as an example of data segregation by lines of business. For the marketing department, the data owner, the key tasks of the data owner include setting up and managing pipelines, managing requests for new pipelines and ingestion sources, performing monitoring, troubleshooting and fixing any data quality issues that arise, and implementing any technical aspects of the organization's governance policies and strategies. The data steward is the subject matter expert in this line of business. The key tasks include knowing what data resides where, what the data means, how it should be categorized and classified, and what data is sensitive and what isn't. Another key task is serving as the point of contact between their line of business and the central governing body of the organization for staying up to date on compliance and regulations and ensuring that the data in their line of business is in compliance. Finally, we can take a look at the business analyst, who is a user of the data in the line of business. And the business analyst is the expert on the business implications for the data in this line of business. And key tasks include knowing how their data fits into the broader enterprise, communicating which data from their line of business should be used in enterprise analytics, and knowing what additional data will need to be collected for this line of business to help answer whatever the current or future business questions will be. Finally, we'll take a look at some of the pitfalls of data segregation. One obvious drawback of the data segregation strategy is the creation of data silos. Additional actions might have to be taken to enable cross-enterprise analytics. Another strategy is the creation of views of datasets. And on the next slide, we will see table 3, an example of views created. This method allows for analytics to be run without risking unauthorized access to sensitive data. It is, however, time-consuming to create and update the views as new data comes in. And here we see 3 types of views of data, where on the left we see the plain text customer names. In the middle column, the first names of the customers have been hashed, and in the rightmost column they have been redacted altogether. Any organization and employee handling data should respect data privacy and security, and a well-implemented privacy and security strategy is part in creating not only a good but successful data governance program. And this is accomplished by creating a collective data culture throughout the entire organization, not relying on individuals doing the right thing. The sources for this lecture has been Data Governance, the Definitive Guide, Chapter 3. I thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.